culture isn't soft, it's the infrastructure that drives retention, resilience, and results. When leadership breaks trust, performance breaks with it. If you don't lead with empathy, transparency, and recognition, your best people start planning their exit long before you realize they're disengaged. That's a quote from Rachel Weeks and a sneak peek at today's episode. Hi there, I'm Carrie Curran, B2B Revenue Growth Executive Advisor, Industry Analyst, and host of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. Every episode, I sit down with top experts to bring you actionable strategies that drive real results. So if you're serious about your revenue growth, hit subscribe today to stay ahead of your competition. In the Culture Multiplier, Why People First Leadership is Your Most Underrated Revenue Strategy, I sit down with Rachel Weeks. She's a veteran marketing executive and HR tech leader, and we explore how values-driven leadership and intentional team culture fuel long-term growth. From navigating layoffs with empathy to embedding recognition into your operating model, Rachel shares smart, scalable ways to drive your performance without burning out your team. Be sure to stay tuned to the end, where Rachel shares practical advice on how to create a culture of recognition even without a big budget or formal platform. Let's go. So welcome, Rachel. Please introduce yourself and share your background and expertise.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Rachel Weeks. I have over 25 years experience in marketing leadership in lots of different size companies. I've spent about half of that time in HR tech. I'm a real people person, and so I've always had a good connection with HR leaders and have tried to instill a lot of HR and leadership practices into my own leadership and management style, which, helps support marketing growth. I specialize in going into companies and building growth engines and setting them up for successful exits and other key milestone events.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're very excited to have you here. And you bring a wealth of experience. And when we were talking, you were sharing a bit about your perspective and insight on kind of the importance beyond marketing strategy and execution, about the other factors to your team and talent that really tie to that those business results at the end of the day. So talk about what you're hearing and seeing when you're talking to your peers in the industry.
Absolutely. Well, we all know that we're in a transformational time, as far as marketing goes and technology goes, with the proliferation of AI solutions. And companies are really struggling, I think, with the change management specifically associated with the introduction of AI. Budget pressures are higher, bigger, stronger, whatever, than they've ever been. And so when you're balancing, the need to consistently demonstrate growth with budget pressures, with the institutional change that's coming with the introduction of AI, and then when it all comes down to it, managing the people through those processes, I think that that's, really making a significant impact on all marketers, so far this year.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. When the numbers, the budgets are tight and the numbers are not quite where they need to be, and the pressure comes from the top down, it's hard as a leader to keep that, fostering that motivation and kind of dedication when everyone's working as hard as they can. So talk a bit about what you're seeing and hearing about when it's coming to kind of people in these situations, other marketers thinking about how should I proceed? How am I going to continue in this role or this industry?
That's a really great question, and I think there are so many different ways to approach it. I'm a really strong believer in values-driven cultures, and it's really important to me that a company is very clear about expressing what their values are, that leadership leads by example in demonstrating those values, and then that really filters down, into the rest of the culture and how people behave. So when you're going through these times like we are now of significant change and uncertainty, if you have, a really solid foundation in your culture that fosters
Hmm.
trust and support and open and honest communication and transparency, it's going to be much easier to navigate through those changes. I think we've all probably experienced cultures that lack some of those qualities, and it's the
Hmm.
uncertainty, the lack of transparency that leads to fear, that leads to disengagement, and then nobody ends up doing well at the end of the day. But if you can foster, more of a supportive, open culture that acknowledges we're going through a lot of change. We're
Hmm.
all learning about what AI is going to mean, for the future of marketers. Let's try and figure this out together. And then that eliminates the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of the unknown. And, really, I think helps people stay engaged and perform at higher levels, even throughout, uncertainty.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what you'd shared before is really the strongest marketing organizations are led by the people who build culture of recognition and appreciation. And you had a good quote to that as well.
Yes, I always try to aspire to remembering that a person who feels appreciated will always do more than what's expected,
Yeah.
because you're part of something. You're part of a company. You're part of a community. You're part of a team. And if you feel appreciated by the people around you, you're going to help them when they're in need, because then they're going to do
Hmm.
the same thing for you. And again, that's just a really important aspect of corporate culture for me that I've learned, throughout my career, and a variety of different experiences with different cultures, that is just so important for me moving forward, not only in where I choose to work, but then also the type of leadership, that I hope that I can bring, anywhere that I go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's such a valuable asset or mindset to bring. And because, as you and I have talked about, we're seeing our friends, our colleagues at across all marketing roles and functions, the agencies are scaling back on headcount. And we understand it happens, especially as you pointed out with efficiencies of AI. We don't want companies to lean too forward to depend on the chat bots. However, layoffs, sometimes need to happen, but it's really about how to do it. So, talk a bit about kind of what you're seeing and how people can really be doing better when it comes to, having to make those difficult choices and changes with the organization.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head that no matter what, it's difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult for everyone involved. And unfortunately, right now, we're just seeing so much more of this happening that I personally am hearing more examples of how poorly companies are
Hmm.
handling it. It's
Hmm.
very easy to look someone in the eye and say, thank you so much for all that you've done, but the business is what it is, and we've got to let you go, and we're going to give you a fair package based on how long
Hmm.
you've been here, etc. But then on the other side of the coin, I heard from someone that I know, a former colleague. She had been with the company for 10 years. They offered her 4 weeks severance and a week and a half of health care. She's a mom. She
Hmm.
carries that for her kids, and she was in shock. I mean, she never
Yeah.
felt less appreciated
Yeah.
than
Especially
for the
after 10
10
years.
years that she
Yeah.
had helped that company grow significantly. And she went back and she was able to negotiate more, that she felt a little bit better about. But
Hmm.
why leave someone with a bad taste in their mouth and not treat them
Yeah.
well? It's small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, which is why companies let people go in the first place. It's not about the cash usually. It's about the
Yeah.
long-term continued investment and the benefits and all of that. So, like I said, it is so much easier to do it
Hmm.
right and to do it in a human, empathetic way. Yet, unfortunately, it's rare. It's
Yeah.
rare. And I've been on both sides of the table, and I've always done my best, of course, when I'm the one delivering the difficult news, to do it fairly and with transparency, and whether or not excuse me, whether or not I've had a hand in what the package they get, it depended. But then I've also been at places that I just can't believe. Really? Like, you let that get out in an email? because like
Yes.
that
Yep.
happens. Everyone's heard of that story. You scroll down in some email and you see your name on a list and you're like, huh?
Yep.
So again, it's easier to do better.
No, and like to your point, there's so many stories.
Mm,
I heard recently of a CEO getting let go and their admin wasn't even notified, and she was reaching out to people to try to find him because he had a meeting to attend. And like there's to your point, there's a business continuation side of it.
mm,
There's like I said, the dignity, and it's
mm,
and we said, there is something to be said for the people who have dedicated their careers for a long time, but regardless of if they started last month or
mm,
last decade, there needs to be that, as you said, that dignity. And one of the other things we've seen some of the large corporations do is when they're large enough to have to make a press release, they say, oh, those were our low performers. And my perspective on that is, if you really have that many low performers, that's a like shame on you. That's a
mm.
poor reflection on your leadership and culture. If you have that many people you've been paying that aren't meeting the standards, and you need to be investing in training and like level up, or do something different. But to label 10% of your workforce as low performers, and now they have to go, like, what does that say about what you've been doing for them, with them, to strengthen their skills, or your investment in them for all the time leading up to this? So I don't believe that when they say that, but it's still not fair to the people who have been there and put in their time. And you talked a lot about, like, so obviously it's a horrible feeling when the rug is ripped out from underneath you and you're laid off. Um, and with the employees that stay, they're witnessing this. And so, going back to your point of like appreciation and productivity, like they're not going to show up every day and like lean in when they could be next. So talk about kind of how to help the employees that have to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, of course, anytime a company goes through a reduction in force, the people who are left behind are fearful. Am I going to be
Mm-hmm.
next? When is this going to happen again? Not if, but when.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
great, now I'm going to have to do twice as much work. And
Right.
so,
Right.
as a leader, you have to acknowledge again that this was difficult. It was difficult
Mm-hmm.
for it to happen, and now it's going to be difficult for those of us who are left behind. So let's talk about it together. Let's think about what's the best way that we as a team can distribute the work
Mm-hmm.
that's left
Mm-hmm.
over and not make it as burdensome for us as we need to do a whole person's worth of job or however
Right.
many people's worth of job, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I find that when excuse me, people are involved in those conversations, they just feel more engaged and like
Yeah.
appreciative that they got to have a say, appreciative that somebody was willing to listen to
Yeah.
what that they were
Yeah.
even asked, as opposed to, okay, this person's gone, you're going to do this part of her job, you're going to do this part of her job, maybe I'm going to do this part of her job, but like, get everything done. That's not a successful way for a leader to really keep their team together,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
regardless of how well you handle the situation, it's very likely that those people are going to start, looking elsewhere. And I mean, yes, it's an extremely difficult market right now, but if you're gonna stay productive after a really difficult event, you need to treat your employees, as human beings and
Yeah.
take care of them. And as a leader, do what you can to take care of them. And hopefully already you fostered a culture of them taking care of each other. And
Yeah.
so, that's something else that's just always really important to me. This is very tactical, but I mean, I am a firm believer that every single function on a team has to have a backup. There is
Mhm.
nothing that infuriates me more that when one person goes on vacation, things come to a grinding halt because
Yep.
there isn't
Mhm.
anybody who's capable of backing them up. I don't build my teams that way. I build my team so that there's always some support system in the event of not only a planned vacation, but an emergency situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So again, that just helps make the change management go a little bit more smoothly because you've already hopefully embedded in your team that that support system to look out for each other and have each other's backs, so that when, you're not available, you're not around for whatever the reason may be, the team is still all working together to, keep things moving.
Hey everyone, it's me, Carrie Curran. If you're a B2B company that sells to marketers, whether you're an agency, MarTech, or AdTech, and your revenue is either flattening, declining, or just not growing fast enough, I can help. I've spent my entire career selling, marketing, and servicing marketers, so I know firsthand the challenges they face, the buying decisions they make, and what actually moves the needle. The truth is, most marketing strategies aren't built for revenue growth, but mine are. As your fractional Chief Growth Officer, I'll bring revenue-focused marketing strategies designed specifically for selling to marketers, deep expertise in agency, MarTech, and AdTech buying behaviors, modern go-to-market strategies that include everything from brand awareness to driving loyalty and retention, and a track record of doubling and even tripling revenue for B2B companies just like yours. So if you're tired of your stagnant results and you're ready to build a marketing engine that actually drives revenue, let's talk. Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com or connect with me on LinkedIn to schedule a consultation. Together, let's build a smarter, more profitable path forward. RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors, we're revenue-based marketing that works. Right. No, I agree with all of that. And I think it's so critical. And, I keep thinking of the examples that I've been hearing lately and from whether you're the employee that stays or the employee that goes, how the optics of how management communicates and the transparency or really the lack thereof, it gets out. People are talking. If you're a business that has clients or customers, like they're going to hear about it. And like, that's just not hopefully doesn't align with the branding that you've been investing all this time. But the other thing is like, then be transparent about, yes, the business needs to continue. So I've seen grumbling about, this agency is doing a ton of layoffs, but now they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on XYZ initiative that should drive business, going to Cannes or billboards. And so it's like having the conversation, because we're all grown-ups, of like, look, we recognize this is a tough time. No one wants to see their teammates and their friends lose their jobs. But please know that part of our path forward is making these investments. Otherwise, people just spin and think that you're spending money to spend money and that you don't care. So lots for leaders to think about. And, one of the things that you talked about earlier that I wanted you to dive into more about is, again, the change management and how to approach this, and again, where you and I are both grown-ups and executives, like we understand layoffs have to happen and there are multiple reasons why they need to happen. But again, how can leaders do a better job? How does change management help, and that approach help leaders to do a better job?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, it comes down to transparency and communication overall, but also I think it comes down to, looking at each member of your team as an individual. And, as a leader, I try really hard to make sure that I know everyone on my team. I know them personally. I know what motivates them. I know what's challenging for them. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. Because I'm human and I want to know them. That's just who I am. But also it helps build a more productive and effective team if you understand everybody's strengths and weaknesses, or what does this person aspire to, or, this person hates doing these things. Well, guess what? This person loves doing these things. And, that's how you create a really functional, collaborative team. And so when you're going through a major change event, hopefully you know how everyone's going to react, or at least you have an idea. And so that when you're talking to everyone as a team and you're sharing the same information and you're talking to them, equally, you're also talking to them separately, independently as individuals, and expressing, okay, I know that this particular thing about what's going on right now is going to stress you out a lot.
Yeah.
And this is how
Hmm.
we are going to address it. Because that's
Hmm.
a totally different conversation. You know, you have 5 people on your team, you have 20 people on your team. That is a totally different situation with every single person on your team. And
Hmm.
so that's what's really important to me. And, you know, sometimes you come into a new position and 2 weeks later, you know, things
Yeah.
happen. You don't
Yeah.
know everybody as well at 2 weeks as you do, you know, obviously under different circumstances,
Hmm.
but you just do the best you can to be human and show empathy and listen. Listen.
Yes. Yep.
And that's, you know, one thing that I think great leaders are really good at. And I will say for myself personally, I've gotten much better at as I've become a more mature leader, is not
Yeah.
worrying always so much about what I'm going to say, but really listening to what other people have to say. And then making
Yeah.
sure that as their leader, I can respond to that, you know, appropriately.
Yeah. I think that's so smart. And I think too, with the communication and transparency, it's, it's a couple other things that you'd mentioned before was about gaining that internal alignment, like having those conversations top down, more in a one-on-one or small group, letting people sit with the layoff news. Don't do it in an email or a company-wide meeting. Or so it's like just, I think to quote you, you said, get everyone on the change bus together,
Yeah.
not chasing behind it. So
Yeah.
I think it's so smart, to your point, what you said earlier, of like helping people feel like they're part of it and feel safe.
Yeah.
But now, and then the other side of this is helping people really feel valued and appreciated, and building a stronger community. So talk about like your experience working with companies that specialized in that, and kind of how can leaders lean in there as well.
Yeah. I had the absolute privilege of working for a wonderful employee engagement company that had a reward and recognition solution. And, you know, we really believed in, you know, our product, and that was entirely embedded in our culture. And, you know, some
Mhm.
of what the product does is it sends people e-cards to recognize them for special accomplishments or for living, you know, one of the company values. And it's very, very public. And, you know, it was gamified, and there were leaderboards about who sent the most and who received the most. And it was just really fun. And I feel
Mhm.
very comfortable saying that every single person who worked at that company learned so much about how important culture and recognition is, that that's something that we all look for, you know, in
Mhm.
our next roles and in our next companies. And there are a lot of companies out there, you know, that offer those types of solutions. And just to dive into a little bit of data, Reward Gateway, for example, you know, did a survey that 75% of US employees said that morale and motivation would improve if managers would simply say thank you more often.
Yeah.
75% of people. It's
Yep.
so easy
Yeah.
to say thank you more often.
Yep.
Another company called Nectar, they did a survey that said 84% of employees feel that recognition affects their motivation to succeed at work. 84% of people. I
Mhm.
mean, these
Mhm.
numbers are just phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
a true business case. This isn't just about what makes people feel good, but you know what? Even if it was, that's not a
Yes.
bad thing. We live in a world that people should feel good more often than I think we
Yep.
all do. But the reality is, in this particular context, is that there is business value in investing in recognizing employees and showing appreciation, whether you use a platform or not. The data is
Yeah.
there that if people just express appreciation and say thank you and recognize people publicly more often, those people are going to work harder. They're going to work better because they're more engaged. They're going to stay with you longer because they're not going to want to leave because they're happy and
Mhm.
they feel good about the environment that they are. And the data goes on and on about how salary isn't the most important thing, you know, especially anyone who's ever been in a toxic culture. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
raising my hand.
Yeah.
You know, if you've been in a toxic
Yeah.
culture, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how much money you make. And if you're in a supportive culture that you feel appreciated, that's letting you grow, it's
Mhm.
developing you, you're developing strong relationships, that's the place you're going to want to stay.
Yeah, I that is the first of all, those stats are incredible. And I think if you were to ask any business leader if I could give you a way to make your team 75 or 84% more productive, wouldn't you invest in that?
Hmm.
And so it's like thinking about, to your point, it's let's be human and recognize people and build that support. And you got me thinking about, I've had roles where we had to pivot and post layoffs or post reorg, and it was hard. And my colleagues and I still reflect on those days as how much we loved it because we were all in it together and we felt like motivated and we saw the goal and we worked together and we were appreciated. And those were really, really tough years and we worked around the clock, but because we're all in it together and we felt the recognition, like I still miss those days.
Hmm.
And so I think it's to your point, it's like, it's not, you don't have to spend money or, go way out of your way to show people they're appreciated. Like you shared some examples of just starting meetings or ways to do that. Do
Hmm.
some more, share some more of those examples that people could apply today.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like to try and do when I have, a weekly or bi-weekly team meeting is start by celebrating successes. And
Mhm.
recognize whomever over that period of time accomplished one of their goals. Katie, she got 10% more subscribers to our blog in the past couple of weeks. Or the next person executed an event that exceeded a webinar that exceeded our registration goal. And that just makes people feel good, and it makes you stronger as a unit, which at the end of the day is how you build successful growth engines. And your podcast is called Revenue Boost, and we're
Yeah.
all here because we're revenue marketers, and we're looking for the secret sauce that's going to help us grow our businesses. And I truly believe that recognition and living in a culture that lives its values, working in a culture that lives its values, is a revenue boost.
Yeah, I agree. And so we need more leaders to think with this perspective and really apply this to their day to day. And so, how do Rachel? How do the people who are listening and are like, I need to start doing this? What are some good ways for them to get started?
Well, first of all, I mean, you can Google or Chat GPT, give me some suggestions for employee recognition. And like I said, there are lots of companies out there. Even if you're not interested in investing in a platform, they have blogs and all of this data I got from, surveys that's readily available that can give you tips and tricks,
Yeah.
for things that you can do and that you can incorporate, into your own leadership. There are
Hmm.
some great books out there. I'd love to plug two authors. One of them is Greg Lederman. He wrote a book called Crave, which is all about giving people what they crave, which is recognition and appreciation. And he has a concept called 10 minutes by Friday, which just means that all you need to do is spend 10 minutes by Friday and you can recognize your people. I mean, again, it's not that hard. It's just very spelled out. And then the other is Deborah Corey. She is a mentor of mine that I had the privilege of working with, and is really a thought leader in recognition and appreciation. She's written a number of books, and I highly recommend that anybody could Google her and learn a lot about recognition as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll put those in the show notes as well. This is super valuable, Rachel. And again, I appreciate you bringing, a topic that applies to all of us outside of marketing, brand strategy, tech tools. It's so incredibly important. And again, not just for marketing, but just all leaders to drive that business growth, because that's really why the businesses exist. So, how do people get in touch with you and learn more about your expertise and background?
Thank you. People can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Rachel Weeks. I'm based out of the Boston area, and I love publishing, just posting about leadership and recognition and, filtering in marketing along the way. So I look forward to hearing from anybody on LinkedIn who'd like to connect.
Excellent. I will make sure to put that in the show notes as well. But Rachel, thank you so much. You've given me a lot to think about and act on. So I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. I had fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, consider sharing with a fellow leader or team member. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps us keep bringing you the strategies and insights that connect marketing to measurable growth. Want more? Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com for more tools, templates, and playbooks to fuel your revenue engine. And be sure to follow me, Carrie Curran, on LinkedIn today. We'll see you soon.